Yo, what is going on, YouTube? Hope you guys are doing fantastic today. Today, we're bringing you guys a build guide for Season 10. It is going to be very rough. A lot of this stuff could change. I played about 30-something games already, 2 days in. So I've been grinding, and these are the kind of feelings I have about these items. What I think is good, what I think is bad, what I think is the best item to rush, what I think is not a good item to rush anymore. A bunch of things like that. So we're going to jump right in. Hope you guys enjoy it. So starting off with starters, always got to touch on the starters. Currently, War Flag is bugged, so it is no longer in the game.
We need to move Lonzo.
That ain't no problem.
Huh?
That ain't no problem.
Well, when it gets back in, I can actually test it a little bit more to see how it feels. But I do think even with War Flag being in the game, I think Benevolence is still your best starting item. Sentinels and War Flag and Protector's Mask all build into some pretty, for the most part, average items. I think Lono's Mask is fine. It makes yourself really tanky. I think both of the Sentinels items, Boon and Embrace, makes you tanky, gives your team a little bit of utility or you a heal. And then War Flag, Spartan Flag, absolutely terrible. And then War Banner, which is a pretty solid item. The thing is, if you look at Benevolence and you look at what it builds into, I think both Compassion and Heroism are two of the top 3 final end game starters for supports. And I also think it's the best laning phase item because it gives you so much more healing and it gives you a lot more gold while also building into these really, really good items. These starters, for the most part, do not differentiate themselves too much. Benevolence is going to be a little bit squishier, but you'll heal a little bit more. You have to be stacking, not getting last hits to actually get a lot of your gold. Same with Sentinel, same with War Flags. That part doesn't really change. The only difference is late game, Compassion, Heroism, just trump all the other ones while also being a very, very strong early game starter. Currently, I think there's 4 items that you can rush in support. I think there's Thebes, Sov, Cloak, and Cannoneers Cuirass. Starting off with Thebes, actually we'll save the best for last. Starting off with Cannoneers Cuirass, I think it's a fine item. I think it's a little weak in the protections, but it makes up for it for being a little bit cheaper. It also has really good health, HP 5, solid protections, and then it gives you the push and extra gold. Your next successful basic attack on an enemy lane minion causes it to explode, killing it and then exploding around doing damage. And it also gives you an extra 25 gold. So you'll be slightly farming a little bit better with this item just because you're getting gold. But that's about it. I think it's very limited in what it can do, and I think it feels fine. But when you're building, you want to be building the best possible items. Prophetic Cloak. I think before they nerfed it, I think it was in contention to be built with Thebes. A bunch of people thought it was just super OP. Hi-Rez just instantly nerfed it. Now you have this very neutered version of it, which is only 10 CDR and then 7 to 15% mitigation late game. So I think it's in a fine spot now, but I think it's so hard to stack that a lot of the time you're just better off not building it. Lastly, Sov. If they have a very physical heavy comp, obviously you can always go Sov if they have 4 physicals and then a Guardian support, or 4 physicals, Guardian solo lane, something like that. Obviously feel free to build Sov, but if they have a pretty split magical physical base, 3-2, 2-3, something like that, or 4 magical, 1 physical. A lot of the times you're just gonna be better off with Thebes. Thebes is just, it's just the jack of all trades. It's so perfect as a support item. The tier 1 is really OP, giving HP 5 and health. Build Thebes. We'll get rid of all this because I think I want you to focus on this. So far, the conclusion I came down to that I think is the most true. Benevolence is the best starter, and then Thebes is still your best first item slot. I know you don't see Renewal here anymore. Touching on Renewal quick. Renewal got a slight cost decrease. It is now 2,300 gold for slightly more health. I think it's slightly more HP 5 and then less protections. I think it was just a bad trade-off for Renewal as an early game item, but I think it makes it slightly better actually mid and late game if they don't build anti-heal. But the problem is this item was just really strong early game because nobody built anti-heal. Most of the time, people are going to be building anti-heal, so I think Mail of Renewal is kind of at a dead spot because it's so reliant on the enemy not building anti-heal, which makes Thebes just kind of your best option almost all the time. So these 16 items are items I just want to talk about quick as potential items in your builds. There's a couple that I left out, like Shoguns isn't in here. If you're playing Fafnir, you're playing double auto attackers, Shoguns is always a good option. Beyond that, these are the most ones I wanted to touch on. I've been going Magi's a lot as a second option to Thebes, and it feels fantastic. You're going to be at about 95 protections of each. You're going to be having 10% cooldown, extra health, HP 5, and then you'll be having this Magi's passive, making you just immune to that CC coming around a corner, or if they're trying to walk up and poke you out, you'll have this Magi's cloak to peel you out. It's a very cheap option. That CDR actually makes it feel a lot nicer than it used to. Breastplate of Regrowth. This is probably my sleeper OP item currently. I think it is a lot better than what it used to be in support. I think it might be slightly worse in other roles. I can't really talk about that too much. I think losing the health does hurt a little bit, but getting 55 physical protections, going Thebes into this item, Thebes kind of gives you the health you need in the early game, so you can go into whatever item you want next. This gives you a ton of survivability, a ton of utility, MP5 for spamming, mana for spamming, cooldown reduction, and then also just makes you extra tanky to those physical gods like the enemy assassin, the enemy hunter, the enemy warrior when he rotates over. And it gives you a lot of survivability, and I think it's very, very, very strong in a majority of the games. Next up, Sov. I'll touch on it again. Sov is always going to be a fine physical item. Do they have a lot of physical gods? Do you want to have a little bit of HP 5 to heal your team up, heal yourself up with? Do you want to make your team a little bit tankier to physicals? Sov is always going to be a fine second option. Stone of Binding, another really, really strong second item. It's slightly more expensive than some of these other options, but with it, you're going to be getting a lot of good stats. 40 protections of each, 250 health, and then you're going to be getting pen on your crowd control abilities. And this actually scales up comparatively to the old binding, which was just flat, I think, 10 pen. So I really, really like this sort of binding. Early game into late game, it scales well at all points. Binding, second option, feels very good. Absolution, not really as a second item, and not really with gods with big ultimates that are game-changing ults like Yamoja. But if you're playing something like Geb, your ult isn't really that game-changing. You're kind of building full tank. It's a nice CC, and that's about it. Absolution feels fantastic if you're playing against gods like Dodgy, Ares, stuff like that. I've been really liking. I played against a Thor and was just ulting kind of whenever the Thor went in, peeling for my teammates, and I was basically playing Geb without playing Geb. Absolution feels great. It's obviously not a first or second item, but third, fourth, fifth, always going to be feeling good for Absolution. It's statted well. The CCR, not really needed, but you're basically buying it for the passive. Fabulous Hoops, touching on this quick. It is dead. I've tried it. It is so bad. Absolutely useless. It's statted pretty average right now. The passive is absolutely useless. There's better items to build. Fabulous Hoops, dead. Lotus Sickle, another item I tried on Yamoja. I think I really like it as an option for Yamoja, Sylve, Terra, just because the cooldown and the health make it so you're very, very tanky. And instead of getting more protections on top of your protections with the old item, you're now getting health. You do lose out on the power, which makes it feel a little bit worse, but it is very, very cheap as a first item, or a second item, sorry. Thebes into Lotus is going to be giving you 550 health. You'll be sitting at 90 physical protections, 65 magical protections before you heal, and then you'll get another 15 on top of that. You'll have movement speed, cooldown reduction. I've been loving Lotus Sickle on healers. Give it a try. Obviously, make sure it's a healer that heals their teammate. Don't build this on Herc.
Disappointed!
Emperor's Armor, again, it's going to be absolutely broken in ranked. If you're not playing ranked, it's going to feel a little bit worse. But in ranked, Emperor's is always going to be a sick, broken, absurdly unfun to play against, but absurdly fun also if you're the one having it and the enemy team is diving you and your Emperor's is getting a ton of work in. Emperor's, it got a slight buff to the passive, and then it also got a slight cost. Actually, I shouldn't say slight. 250 gold is a lot. It got a pretty big cost nerf from 2k to 2250, which makes it feel worse early game, but I think as a fourth option, it can be fine. The problem is once you get EFG, Emperor's is kind of becoming null. So you have to get it in like a third, maybe fourth slot. Because if you get it fifth, it's going to be pretty useless. Druids Fury. I think this item on release was really, really strong. And now that it's gotten nerfed, I think I overestimated it a little bit. The item is good, but it is very, very expensive. 2,500 gold for the stats. And the passive is very strong, but it's once every 15 seconds, and you have to get it stacked also. So you're going to get about one use of it in a fight, and then that's it. And you're paying 2,500 gold for this item. I think it's good, but why would you build this to just get true damage for yourself when you could build Stone of Binding, which has, for the most part, better stats? You're going to be losing on a little bit of MP5, but it gives you better stats and a better passive in team fights if you can use the CC. That's why I'm not a big fan of Druids right now. I think it can feel fine. It's probably a pretty fun item, but I don't think it's too strong. And actually, let me touch on this matchup quick, because somebody asked about this in my stream. Breastplate of Regrowth and Gladiator Shield, both very, very comparable. The difference is Gladiators is a little bit more of an offensive item, do a little bit more damage. If you want that, then this item will feel a lot better. But if you want to be a little bit more utility, help your team out, be able to set up a little bit easier, I think Regrowth is the way to go. Spectral Armor. Do they have crit? Build it. Do they not have crit? Don't build it. Manicore Spikes. It's okay. I think people really underestimated it at the end of last year, but I think now with all these new items that are just as cost efficient, just as good stats, really good passives, I think it's kind of settled into below average now. If you compare it to like Stone of Binding, well, to be fair, it pairs very well with Stone of Binding because they both proc off your CCs and it makes your damage more, both of them. So they pair well together, but you can't really build both of them. If you're looking at Thebes into Manticore or Binding into Manticore, a lot of the times Binding, you're going to be helping out your entire team to do more damage with every ability instead of just one. Pridwin, for the most part, it is a dead item. If you need 20% cooldown, you absolutely need cooldown badly. You're playing Yamoja, you realize you're 4 items deep with 0% cooldown. Slap on a Pridwin, sure, but for the most part, you shouldn't be looking into your builds trying to fit a Pridwin into it. Abyssal Stone. I've not tried this one too much, to be honest. Straight up, I've not tried it too much. But I cannot think of a world where this item is valuable more than a lot of other items you could buy. If you're playing against an Arthur, you're playing against an Artio, maybe it has some value. But other than that, I think there's just better items. Oni's Hunter Garb. It is now the to-go-to magical defense item when you want to be as tanky as possible. No longer is Bulwark in the game. Oni's got a nice buff. Well, I guess shift, but overall it was a buff. Onis, if you want to be super tanky, build Onis. Yeah. And then the last two options, the anti-heal options, Pestilence and Contagion. Contagion is very strong right now. Point blank period. Very, very strong. Anti-heal on top of doing damage when you're hit by CCs. Pestilence, anti-heal, and then on top of it, every time you're hit by abilities, you give out anti-heal. If you are the only anti-heal god on your team or nobody else is building anti-heal and you need to get a lot across, Pesty can be fine. But for the most part, 2,400 gold is very expensive for the passive. It is a lot of anti-heal. It stacks up to 55%, which is a lot. You have to get hit to actually stack it up. So it takes a little bit of time. It can be fine, but a lot of the time it's just not really worth it. Contagion is usually the better option. If you're looking at your build and you're like, I need anti-heal this game. Something like Thebes, Contagion, Shoguns feels a lot better than Thebes, Pestilence, and I don't know, another physical defense item, lotus sickle, something like that. It'll feel a lot better with Contagion in that physical slot. So build Contagion if you are having a problem building anti-heal. If you do need a lot more, Pesty can be fine. Overall, your build should look something like, if you were playing a backline god, meaning are you playing with your hunter, are you playing with your mage, you should be building Compassion into Thebes, into some combination of these items. Try to get your protections up to at least 250 and then your health up to at least 3k. If you can get to something like that, your build will feel really good. Obviously, you're going to be going over that the longer the game goes on, but try to get to that area. If you're playing against 4 physicals, get your physical damage or defense up a little bit quicker than your magical. And then if you're playing a dive guardian or a dive warrior, dive assassin, and you don't want to have to worry about Compassion and getting put into combat with your blink, Heroism is still very, very good. You don't have to worry about proccing it, same with Compassion. And it's just very, very strong. The stats aren't great, but it's still solid. So Heroism, very good. I've been going it a lot in Ranked, and I really do like it. But I can recognize, even if I'm building Heroism a lot, Compassion is the better option. All in all, a little short build guide for Season 10. A lot of stuff might change. I'm for sure set on Benevolence being your starter, Thebes being your first option. The more games I play, the more I'll be able to break down items I think are worse or better or whatever. But currently, Benevolence, Thebes is my build. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll see you guys again next time. Peace.